Good evening from London. My name is Mohammed Ahmedullah. I'm the Secretary of Brickland Circle. Tonight's event is like a continuation, in a kind of continuation of the Bengal History Week that we normally run in October, but this year we ran for the whole of October, the whole month. And then we decided to do a few more until the end of the year, in a way to make it a contribution to the Bangladesh 50th year of Bangladesh independence celebration. I'm the Secretary of Brickland Circle, and you can get information about our organization from our website. It's bricklandcircle.org. I will pass on to Sudipna, who will chair and run today's session, and I'll be around to help technically. Sudip. Sudip, you can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, should I start now?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody, and good evening. We are really delighted to have Tisha Singh in this talk, in this circle. I'd like to introduce Tisha and her today's talk. Tisha Singh is a doctoral researcher at the Department of History and Classical Studies at McGill University in Canada. She's the vice chair of GSC, Canadian Historical Association, and works as an editor of a journal of South Asian studies called HARF at her university. Her work focuses on theatre and performance studies in South Asia and modern Britain. She has previously completed a master's in modern history from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. I'd like to invite Tisha to present her paper and talk. Please, over to you, Tisha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chakraborty, for that generous introduction, and thank you for very generously agreeing to chair today's session. I really look forward to the discussion. I want to begin this talk with thanking Brickland Circle for providing me with this opportunity to present my research and my doctoral project. Also, I would like to thank Department of History and Classical Studies and my supervisors who have incessantly supported me throughout my doctoral studies, especially during the years of the pandemic, which is still ongoing. But for a graduate student who was debarred of the archives, it becomes very necessary to get support from his or her department. And I'm very indebted to the Department of History and Classical Studies, providing me with such support during such difficult times. So without further ado, I would begin today's presentation. I would like to share the screen. I hope the screen is visible. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so today's presentation is titled Reading Actresses' Autobiographies from Indian People's Theatre Association in Calcutta. This is a part of my larger dissertation, which deals with performative radicalism and socio-political theatre in London and Calcutta. But this stems from my archival work and research from British Library during the year 2019, and it focuses on Calcutta and Bangladesh. So broadly, just giving an overview of what my talk would incorporate, my presentation is divided into two parts. The first half reflects on the dominant social thought regarding actresses from the 19th century that shaped debates and discussions in the 19th and 20th centuries in Calcutta. This part will also highlight the tense political climate of the 20th century to set the stage for the second part. The second part of my presentation would talk about Shriti Mitchell and Reba Roy Chaudhary, reflecting on their nuanced political histories and personal experiences and the new gender paradigm in the realm of people's theatre that they became a considerable part of. So the contents is on the screen for everyone, for the audience's perusal. Moving forth. Yes, so I want to begin this talk with a reflection on two short stories that actually inspired me a lot to take forth this research on actresses. One is Man Bhanjon by Rabindranath Tagore, and the other is The Actress by Munshi Premchand. Both of the short stories reflect the social thought of 19th century Calcutta regarding women and theatre. So I would like to recite a few lines from both the short stories in the original text. One is in Bangla, one is in Hindi, but the translation for everyone is on screen. So the first one is from Man Bhanjon, which was written in the year 1895 by Rabindranath Tagore. The part is, Shei Shongite Tane, Loko Abhuroner Chotaye, Ebong Shommilito Prashongsa Dhonite, Shei Khonokaler Jonne Somaj, Sonshar, Somostoi Bishrito Hoiya Gelo. মনে করিল এমন এক জায়গায় আসিয়াছি যেখানে বন্ধন মুক্ত সৌন্দর্যপূর্ণ স্বাধীনতার কোনো বাধা মাত্র নেই শুধু মাঝে মাঝে আসিয়া ভীত স্বরে কানে কানে বলে বউ ঠাকুরন এইবার বাড়ি ফিরিয়া চলো দাদা বাবু জানিতে পারিলে রক্ষা থাকিবে না A French dramatist and theatre director, Antonin Artaud, in his seminal text, The Theatre and its Double, which was published in the year 1938, suggests how theatre has the power to cause thinking. Artaud was one of the strongest influences on theatre in the 20th century and was of the view that theatre goes beyond banal values of relaxation and pleasure. A performer has a corporeal identity formed by his or her performance that defines the contours of creative labor. Artaud highlights that art does not function in a plastic way, but acquires characteristics and evolves on confrontation with the absolute. Aptly portrayed through Giribala's character in Man Bhanjon, where Tagore's female protagonist, who is also the spectator of theatre, is intoxicated by the metaphysical powers of the performances she witnesses, to an extent that it provides an outlet from the mundane domestic goals of her day-to-day life. Being a grihini and Thakurbo, respectable middle-class housewife, theatre reflects her psychological conflicts and daily realities of her life. However, the question of her interest in drama remains a moral one in the context of her social realities. Tagore's short story aptly captures the sociological rift between a respectable middle-class housewife portrayed through Giribala's character and a theatre actress portrayed through Lobongo's character. This cleavage in the social roles of both is personified through the character of Gopinath, who is Giribala's husband, but later on becomes Lobongo's lover. The story takes a crucial turn when Giribala's character wants to cross over the liminal space of respectability and become an actress. This transition is not only reflective of a movement from the domestic to the public, but also from the higher grounds of morality to being associated with a profession that is so strictly stigmatized and considered as immoral for women. The story is reflective of trials and tribulations of a housewife who wants to break away from the societal fetters that she has been grappled with since her marriage to Gopinath and choose acting as her active vocation and utilize her creative labor. This transition by the end of the story results in Giribala becoming a very popular actress, garnering love and fame, even more than that of Lobongo's character. And this is also entirely through her creative labor. Now, I will put Premchand's short story called The Actress right in contrast to this one. In Munshi Premchand's short story, which was written in the year 1927, almost 42 years later, Man Bhanjon, we witness a reverse desire. Just want to shift the slide. I'm so sorry, the screen is stuck for some reason. Yes.
Yes.
So in Munshi Premchand's short story called The Actress, written in the year 1927, almost 42 years later, we witness a reverse desire of the lead female protagonist, Tara Devi. This story was written at the time when the moral anxiety regarding women in theatre had done rounds in the public circle in Bengal. It is important to note here that Premchand later on became the president of Progressive Writers Association, and in his presidential address, he highlights a new relation between a progressive movement and the left-wing movement in India, and hints towards the formation of IPTA in 1943. Now, I will recite a few lines by Premchand to highlight the kind of impact the lead character's Tara Devi's performance had on audience, which again highlights her creative labor and the formation of her corporeal identity. The translation is on screen. जिस वक्त वह शकुंतला के रूप में राजा दुष्यंत के सम्मुख खड़ी ग्लानि, वेदना और तिरस्कार से उत्तेजित भावों को आग्नेय शब्दों में प्रकट कर रही थी, दर्शक वृंद शिष्टता के नियमों की उपेक्षा करके मंच की ओर उन्मत्तों की भांति दौड़ पड़े थे और तारा देवी का यशोगान करने लगे थे। कितने ही तो स्टेज पर चढ़ गए और तारा देवी के चरणों पर गिर पड़े। सारा स्टेज फूलों से पट गया, आभूषणों की वर्षा होने लगी। यदि उसी क्षण मेनका का विमान नीचे आकर उसे उड़ा न ले जाता, तो कदाचित उस धक्कम धक्के में 10-5 आदमियों की जान पर बनाती। मैनेजर ने तुरंत आकर दर्शकों को गुण ग्राहकता का धन्यवाद दिया और वादा भी किया कि दूसरे दिन फिर वही तमाशा होगा। The last line, which translates to the manager immediately came and thanked the audience for their appreciation and promised the same play would be performed again the next day. The phrase "phir wahi tamasha hoga" is symbolic of the actress's corporeal identity through her labor that has enchanted her audience and is commensurate with her creative labor and talent she portrays while on stage. In the story, Tara Devi falls in love with the upper-class man whose name is Kuvar Nirmal Kant. When asked to marry him, Tara Devi is too skeptical as she considers herself as a tainted, fallen woman who has been in the public eye for far too long. For her, it is not an easy transition to become a respectable housewife from the infamous performer she considers herself to be. These two short stories are reflective of a transition which is not necessarily teleological. For Giribala, it was from domestic to the public. For Tara Devi, it was a question of transition from the public to the domestic, which is nearly considered as impossible in Premchand's story. The reason why I want to highlight these short stories is because it is reflective of the modern social thought during the 19th and early 20th century regarding the profession of acting, moreover of the actress, and the choices at her disposal. This social thought was imbued in a debate that peaked by the end of the 19th century, especially regarding introduction of actresses in theatre. One of the prominent examples is when Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar severed his connection with theatre upon the induction of actresses, despite being a prominent writer and a reformer. Moving on. I hope the slides work. I'm so sorry, there is a lag in changing the slides for some reason.
I think it will take, it works.
Yes, so this diagram aptly portrays the complex matrix of audience and theatre relationship in 19th century Calcutta. And moving on, I would like to talk about the actress-prostitute connection. One of the prominent reasons for this debate was the actress-prostitute connection that lingered in the social circle for a very long time due to the public nature of the profession, but mostly of the complex matrix of similarities and dissimilarities drawn between both the professions, owing to the gendered lens that was being attuned to the female performer and her sexual identity. This was not the case when it came to male actors and analyzing their creative labor and corporeal identity on stage. In ancient texts, prostitutes were often referred to as Bornari or Borangana because of the source of her earnings would be performing arts. Borangana literally translates to public women, much different from the etymological evolution of the word prostitute. Even under colonial state, prostitutes were a fluid category that involved dancers, musicians, singers, and actresses. It represented the complexity of the image of a public woman or women in public sphere involved in performing arts. The depiction of sexualized female form has been an integral part of classical Indian art, for example, Yakshis, dancers, Naikas, courtesans, and apsaras. Early criticism of sexualized images were counteracted by a post-independence justification that focused on their aesthetic value as well as their Indianness, which bestowed on them a spiritual and symbolic meaning. An anonymous essay published in Arya Darshan in the year 1877, Rangaloy Borangona talks about this polemical connection between actress and prostitute. The public and private debate regarding the profession of actress has been to a large extent seen from this perspective. The symbolic meanings of actress/prostitute have deeper implications and roots that I am not going to delve deeper, as it should be a tone to a different talk. However, I'm going to highlight the key points that this essay underlines, which are essential to trace the trajectory of social thought that got deeply imbued in the identification of actresses in the late 19th century. So, the author says that the conflation of actresses with prostitutes is not a modern phenomenon. It has a classical precedent. In the essay, the author tries to focus on the sublime aspects of why the system of using prostitutes as actresses should not be considered as disrespectful or profane, as it has its roots in ancient history, even in mythology. Both the occupations involved higher performative strategies in case of courtesans, dancers, or actresses. The essay also discusses cross-dressing and transvestism in theater. Transvestism was another area of moral anxiety where controlling, restricting, and maintaining homoerotic tendencies peaked. The author in the essay draws an overall justification from the logic of mimetic realism that female roles should be authored by females. However, the underpinnings of this were deeply tethered to the abject fear of homoeroticism and homosexuality. Thirdly, the essay also draws a line between respectable women from domestic backgrounds and the tainted women like prostitutes who became an active participant through their creative labor on stage. This could also be perceived as emancipatory to a certain extent. So what happened is that during 1870s, a major change occurred in Bengali cultural arena when some measures were taken up to recruit actresses from red light areas to perform in Bengali plays, as women from quote-unquote respectable families, Bhadramohilas, were not allowed to enter public domain of men. Actresses like Binodini, Golab, Jagatarini, Elokeshi, Tinkuri were among others, left a lasting impact of their talent coming from similar backgrounds. The sexualized female form that is often circumscribed with purity in classical Indian art was completely turned upside down with the influx of prostitutes. Professor Nandi Bhatia writes that the unavailability of middle-class women to perform in theaters and to financially sustain theater houses, many theater owners willingly accepted working class women, provided that they were quote-unquote reformed. Arya Darshan's essay also discusses about reforming the fallen women who entered theater to channel their creative labor in the field of art. This was contextualized in the background debates during this time that centered on education for women and improving their socio-economic identity. However, this was indeed an aspect of moral panic under the colonial state, as induction of public women was considered to encourage immorality and intervened the logic of cordon sanitaire or clean spaces. These actresses, should becoming stage artists, did garner respectability to a certain degree on the outset. However, this led to an uneven development of a contradiction between public and private. This unevenness was marked by a movement of these women who, between two occupational choices that were socially considered to be contradictory. An interesting dichotomy developed at this point, as on one hand, their portrayal of such roles were hugely appreciated. The characters they portrayed were of saints whom Hindus worshipped. And at the same time, behind the proscenium, they were ostracized and directed towards sexual gaze by Bhadralok society. Binodini, who later became one of the most talented actresses and skilled actresses on stage, left behind her narrative of this transition process in her autobiography, Amar Kotha. Her narrative definitely encompassed experiences of persecution and humiliation. Her scathing criticism of men from the highest echelons of Bhadralok society portrays a fluent understanding of the socio-economic powers in operation in the society at that time. Her perceptive analysis in Amar Kotha, her autobiography, also points to the constructed frame of morality by the society used to serve its own purposes. Here, I would like to draw from Mary Renda's response to Anne Stoller's book, Tense and Tender Ties, where tender ties reflect on the humanist intervention of colonial rule, so to say, the intervention of intimate spaces by the colonial state, and the tense ties in Foucauldian terms reflect on the production of colonial inequities. Mary Renda, in her comment on this book, reflects that it would be a mistake to read body and sexuality to be either equivalent or coterminous with the intimate. And Stoller, in her book, Carnal Knowledge and Imperial Power, reflects on how sexuality operates as a dense transfer point in power relations. At the same time, it is essential to acknowledge the broader investigative possibilities of the body or history of intimacy that further has the capacity to yield a nuanced understanding of individual and collective authority. Antoinette Burton and Tony Ballantyne, in their book Moving Subjects, completely reject the notion of private and public as segregated spheres, and they are more driven to nominate mobility as a constitutive factor in the social life of sentiment and its multiple articulations. This understanding becomes very crucial in identifying this actress-prostitute connection in Bhadralok society. In articulating the intimate in case of stage actresses, it further enables the intimate powers in the most translocal sense, reflecting the instability that has historically operated. While arguing for a feminine space in theatre, it is essential to focus on this translocality of historical spaces that is reflected on how a subject gains subjectivity by moving in and through them. This analysis becomes crucial to understand the position of actresses and the choices at their disposal during this time in the development of modern social thought in 19th century Calcutta. How they operated within a gendered framework and mandated space that was determined by their creative labor, and to a certain extent tried to overcome the overtly sexualized portrayal of female performers, often intervening their intimate spaces. Having given this context that largely reflects the social thought regarding actresses and female performers, I will now directly go on to the socio-politically charged decades of the 1930s and 40s to contextualize the actress who also became a conscious political worker during this time. The formation of Progressive Writers Association, which was reflected a new left trend that was not only apparent in the socio-political and economic context, but also in the cultural context. While gauging the success of the progressive cultural movement in India during 1930s and after, several historians have argued that the early demise of the Pan-Indian movement was rendered to the inability to incorporate the rapidly changing cultural situation between 30s and 50s. One of the primary reasons is that cultural movement was then hinged on the then cultural issues, and this persistence of the same form has been both an inspiration and an impediment, as pointed out by K. N. Panikkar. This situation can be rightly adjusted to the form and content debate in Hayden White's theorization. The primary problem with progressive cultural movement during this time was that the content changed according to the social and political conditions. However, the form in terms of concepts and vocabulary of the movement remained the same. I would like to now highlight certain lines from Munshi Premchand's presidential address to the Foundation Conference of the Progressive Writers Association. The quote is on your screens. We believe that the new literature of India must deal with the basic problems of our existence today, the problems of hunger, the problems of poverty, social backwardness, and political subjection. All that drags us down to passivity, inaction, and unreason, we reject as reactionary. All that arouses in us the cultural spirit, which examines institutions and customs in the light of reason, which helps us to act, to organize ourselves, to transform, we accept as progressive. During the 1930s, intellectuals and eminent scholars started writing for the cause of peace, primarily concentrating on anti-war and anti-fascist literature. Writers like Maxim Gorky, Romain Rolland, André Malloch, Thomas Mann, Waldo Frank, among others, were a part of World Congress of Writers for the Defense of Culture in Paris in 1935. The First Manifesto was sponsored by Indian Progressive Writers Association, signed by Rabindranath Tagore, Prafulla Chandra Roy, Pramadha Chaudhary, Ramananda Chatterjee, and Nandalal Bose, among others, and was sent to the peace conference convened by Romain Rolland on 3rd September 1936 at Brussels. It highlighted, today the specter of the world war haunts the world. Fascist dictatorship has revealed its militarist essence by its offer of gun instead of butter, and the lust of empire building in place of cultural opportunities. The devastating Bengal famine of 1943 had a lasting impact on the content produced by writers and intellectuals during this time. Works of art with new content came into the front line, which effectively utilized folk forms, for example, Panuhali songs of Nibarun Pumbi, famine dance of Ponupal, which was also known as Mahamari Nritto, Gombhira songs of Malda, Kobigan of Horipodo Kushari, Nepal Sharkar, Ramesh Seal, Main Bhukha Hoon, a play by Binoy Roy, and Jaban Bundi and Nobunno of Bijon Bhattacharya. This spurt of new content led to the formation of IPTA in 1943. George Mohan Mitchell writes in the year 1979 that after August 1942 resolution of Quit India, when the leaders were put behind bars and the people were groveling in the slush of despair, the Communist Party shouldered the responsibility of organizing masses against Japanese fascism and rehabilitation of famine-stricken people. The IPTA tried to arouse the conscience of community and to make people work for this great humanist endeavor. So this is a snippet from the Manifesto of Progressive Writers Association. This is a picture from the play Bhukha Hai Bengal. E.M.S. Namboothripat, in his review article on Shruti Pradhan's Documents of the Marxist Cultural Movement in India 1986, and I inserted a snippet 3 slides before, which is one of the enriching cultural repositories of IPTA, the documents of IPTA from around India. E.M.S. Namboothripat, on reviewing this, writes that the second conference held in Calcutta in the year 1938 made certain amendments to the above mentioned, which he says were not of substantial nature. In a fleeting sense, he adds that among the literary trends to be combated, the amendment added the word sexual libertinism. This highlights, even in the light of progressive progressive movements, social and sexual confrontation were not allowed to intersect. This also becomes crucial when it comes to the question of actresses in the Indian People's Theatre Association in the context of the socio-political climate heightened by war, fascism, and a rift in leftist movement. The experiences of women in IPTA during adverse socio-political and economic circumstances necessitated overcoming gender and class barriers. The gendered identities were negotiated through performative strategies that in turn redefined the gender paradigm previously in place for female performers. This redefinition marked a rupture from the previous generation of actresses I just discussed, like Binodini, Jogakarini, Elokeshi, who were often treated as low-class or fallen women by the virtue of their profession. By saying that it marked a rupture, I do not intend to say that the position was completely turned upside down, but there was a sort of transition during a transition in the professional space of actresses. Ania Loomba, in her book Revolutionary Desires, analyzes radical communist women and notes how the neglect in deciphering the histories of women engaged in active socio-political work itself is striking. Since many of these narratives and autobiographies were only used perfunctorily to gauge the larger socio-political movement and was a source and a part of the larger meta-narrative, Shriti Mitchell's and Reba Roy's autobiographies highlight their voices and moreover provide a nuanced experiential history of how their roles shaped the new gender paradigm amidst the tense socio-political climate. Actresses of the IPTA had to spend time in close proximity with the male counterparts, therefore exposing themselves to a new set of gender culture. Within the organization, IPTA, women primarily remained performers, but within the larger socio-political movement of which IPTA was a considerable part of, these women represented active socio-political participation through performance strategies. Now, moving on towards the analysis of Shriti Mitchell's and Reba Roy's autobiographies. So I will begin with a quote from Shriti Mitchell's autobiography. I'm so sorry, there's again a lag in the slides. Yes. Shriti Mitchell says, and I quote, "I cannot remember when during my childhood I felt an attraction towards theatre, but my first appearance in the professional theatre was purely accidental. When I was in Calcutta living with my elder sister and uncle, one day my cousin Bijan Da, famous theatre director Bijan Bhattacharya, decided to write a play on 1940 Bengal famine. People called it man-made famine. In this play, I first participated as a replacement to the female protagonist, as at that time, there was a scarcity of female performers. And the lead protagonist had suddenly left the group. I never considered acting as a profession. 30, 40 years ago, I did not even consider acting as a job. I felt nervous. I never performed with boys and thought it would be my last performance. I had the ambition of being either a doctor or a professor or a social activist. By the time of Bengal famine, Bengal was brought down to its knees. It had become imperative for Mitra, among thousands of others, to help people in distress, as it was an unprecedented time at the grassroots level. She was already a social worker who conducted relief kitchens. She says it was this time the specter of death, of seeing bodies on roads, haunted the sites. And this was the time when she got involved in theatre. The two famous plays, Nobonno and Joban Bundi, released soon after and were enormously successful. Shriti Mitchell was born in a small block town of North Bengal called Thakurgaon. Her town did not have a high school, but it did have a theatre house named after King George V's coronation. It was called the George Coronation Hall. The hall had separate areas of men and women. Women were subjected to the peripheries of theatre even as a spectator. They did not have seats allocated to them and had to carry their own mattresses. One of the other aspects of discouraging women from being a part of the audience were the ticket sales. Mitra points out that the tickets for men were priced at ₹1, where else for women they were priced at ₹12. She recollects how during her childhood, her father disliked her and her mother's theater visits and said women, especially girls from respectable families, were not allowed to perform in public theater. These are the pictures from Shriti Mitchell's performance in several plays. So Shriti Mitchell fondly remembers how her mother loved watching plays and calls it the very beginning of the beginning. She recollects how IPTA was formed in the context of Second World War and Bengal famine. She underlines how IPTA was created out of necessity. It was a cultural front of dance, drama, songs, and recitation. Mitra's association with IPTA lasted till 1948. Primarily working in the Bengal wing, she was a part of path-breaking plays like Jyoti Rindro Mitro's Nobojibonir Gan and Madhubon Shirkoli. The play Nobonno was a landmark and one of the most prominent plays of IPTA. She highlights how spectators who gathered were deeply imbued in the cultural program and in the drama itself. IPTA, in a certain sense, as Mitra points out, articulated the other theatre, or the people's theatre, breaking away from the bourgeois arrangement of theatre, that is the proscenium, what a lot of historians have also called as a colonial input. Mitra insists that IPTA's theatrical forays were a social responsibility. One of the most prominent plays of IPTA, which was based on Bengal famine, Jabanbandi, was also made into a Hindi movie called Dharti Ke Lal. Shriti Mitchell was a part of both. I would like to play the trailer of Dharti Ke Lal, like the first half. I hope that is visible.
बाल बच्चे नहीं हुए तो बेटा मेले ठेले में कौन सा के इनके बिया को 5 बरस बने को आए ना
So this is one of the rare examples where theater and cinema came together. And Shriti Mitchell in her autobiography states that she recollects sitting in the residence of Khwaja Ahmad Abbas, the director of the movie, and discussing the script. She points out how at that time, Shriti Mitchell did not see acting as a profession, but an act of patriotism. Learning about economic history regarding black marketing and famine instilled a zeal in actors and actresses alike to quote unquote perform. However, the main objective was also to collect funds for the people affected during famine. The touring group, of which she was a considerable part of, toured from village to village collecting funds. Mitro says that this was a dangerous time. And I would like to discuss an incident which she discusses in her autobiography. Yes. So she quotes, she says, and I quote, that this was a time of blackout in Calcutta. All the lights of the city remained off, especially the street lights. Roads were almost empty, except the occasional noises of military vans and whistles of the American soldiers, Tommies. In those days, the roads were not safe for women. At a horrific incident regarding a train travel, again, she says, and I quote, we were looking for an empty compartment, but wherever we were trying to enter, I found it reserved for army men. Suddenly, we found people running towards an empty compartment. We jumped into the coach, fighting with the crowd, and suddenly I found myself on the floor. Someone put a huge sack on my body. I had no power to shout. Lolita shouted, "Money will die." Someone lit a candle and helped me come out. The feminine space actress like Shriti Mitchell mandated was tainted by patriarchal mores inside as well as outside, leading to the subject gaining subjectivity by moving in and through them. Mitra quotes, "In our society, if a woman does something with her husband, she's great, and she's taking care of her husband and is relegated to the domestic chores. I had to work hard both inside and outside." And I quote, this is from Hik Desh, a weekly Desh magazine from a primary source. The dynamic also of a group theatre represented a hierarchy of the writer, director, lead actors, and the supporting actors. In most of the plays, the writer, director, and the lead actor was a male comrade. Hence, the spaces these actresses mandated were solely based on the fame they garnered through their creative labor and performative strategy. In one of the chapters in Mitra's memoir, she highlights how conventional beauty standards dictated opportunities for an actress. In one of the famous plays of Rabindranath Tagore, Char Adhyay, the lead protagonist was a lady of eloquent beauty as written by Tagore. The character's name was Ella. Mitra says that she wanted to put on some makeup for the character, but was taunted by Shambhu Mitro, the lead actor at that time, who wanted her to concentrate on her character solely. During that time, post the plays, actors used to receive a lot of letters of appreciation or criticism from the audience. Mitra points out how some of them wrote that she should not try to do Ella with an ugly face. However, Mitra's acting abilities and the the creative labor she showed on stage did garner a lot of attention in a positive way. In order to analyze one of the incidents that Mitra talks about in her memoir, I would like to highlight a line from Ellen Diamond's influential essay talking about the Brechtian/feminist model that can lead to the dismantling of gaze, particularly male gaze actresses often were subjected to. In the essay, Diamond tries to provide a way out by utilizing Brechtian theory. However, I would like to underline the problematization of body and its corporeal identity formed through the character for an actor. Diamond says, in its conventional iconicity, theatre laminates body to character, but the body in historicization stands visibly and palpably separate from the role of the actor as well as the role of the character. It is always insufficient and open. The larger argument which I want to draw from this is that body of an actor cannot be detached completely from its historicization. Moreover, the historicity of the social context is reflected even when the socio-political contexts change. For example, the actress-prostitute debate. In the case of actresses of the Indian People's Theatre Association, arguing for a feminine space within the transitioning forms of theatre and cultural movement does not yield into a claim that the space was entirely feminized in the broadest meaning of the term. I just aim to problematize the debate. I will try to explain this utilizing an example on how conflation of an actress with a prostitute was steeped in the social thought in Bengal, even at the grassroots level. While rehearsing for one of the famous plays, Jaban Bundi, the group theatre of which Shriti Mitchell was a part of, she was also collecting funds for famine-stricken people in Bengal, as I mentioned in the previous section. Mitra recollects once when the team went to Dhaka and Narayanganj, present-day Dhaka, Bangladesh. Due to the scorching heat and rigorous rehearsing techniques the group practiced on an everyday basis, Mitra ventured out in the village to get some water. 2-3 peasant women came out of their huts to help her. However, the head of the family, who was an adult male, forbade them to give water to quote-unquote noties or public women. For Shriti Mitchell, who was working relentlessly to help the same villagers, it was a moment of utter shame and despair. She categorically points out how things changed after she married Shambhu Mitchell. I leave her story at that and also try to move on to Reba Roy Chaudhary. Reba Roy was born in Rajshahi but grew up in Rangpur town in Bangladesh. She says that her mother was a cultured lady, and as a child she loved to watch plays, especially the ones by Shishir Bhadri. Childhood was hard, with a lot of financial hardships that Roy's family had to face. Roy says how during her childhood, she secretly practiced Tukaran Bala and Pahari Sanyal songs. She constantly drew inspiration from her elder brothers and actively participated in the students' movement during her time at Rangpur College. She says her brothers taught her, quote-unquote, communism. She points out how, due to her active participation in politics, she did not receive much affection from other women in her family, as she would often return late at night. Roy frequently read the Communist Party's journal, Saptahik Jana Yuddho, and became an active member of women's self-defense. Roy, with her other women comrades, gathered domes and relief by hosting free food stalls, distributing khichuri and arranging for medicine. This is two of pictures where you can see Reba Roy performing in 1945 in the Central Squad, and also the picture on the right is Rekha Jain, Reba Roy and Ruby Dutt of the Central Cultural Squad. Yes. Roy recollects how she was a part of creating women's organization every block from Badar Hanj to Neel Famari, Kuri Gram, Gai Bondo, Domar, Lalmonihat. Roy was also a considerable part of radical communist activities in Badarganj and Rangpur. She, with her other female comrades, would raid the storehouses of middlemen during Bengal famine and would distribute rice among the commoners who did not have access. She recollects that in the year 1943, when Kanak Mukherjee reviewed women's movement as a part of the Communist Party, Reba Roy received her membership. At that time, she was just 18 years old. Right after the legalization of Communist Party by the colonial authorities in the year 1942. Reba Roy discusses her experience in Calcutta in the month February in the year 1947. She points out how that amount that she earned through her performances, which was around rupees 25 a month, seemed to be sufficient. And they would also save a minimum amount for their families. During that time, political climate was charged owing to the naval mutiny, release of prisoners of Azad Hind Red Fort trials, and the Tehbaga movement. The touring group, of which Reba was a considerable part of, would tour from Borishal to Jalpaiguri to Damohan to Chattogram. At every stop, they used to perform, and their accommodation could be anything from a makeshift warehouse to palaces. Uncertainty loomed large for the entire group. I would like to highlight her prison experience, which like when CPI was banned around the year 1948, thousands of comrades were imprisoned. IPTA's leadership also went through a massive alteration during this time. The PIT cell was formed and comprised of Sadhana Chaudhary, Preeti Banerjee, Horipodo Kushari, Bhupati Nandi, Shajol Joy Chaudhary, Mumtaz Ahmed Khan, Jibon Mukherjee, and Reba Roy Chaudhary. I want to point out how Roy highlights that she was a part of the underground communist meetings with quote unquote the leaders that comprised of the leading men of the party like Mrinal Sen, Debobruto Bishwas, and Krishna Banerjee. Debobruto Bishwas's house was the makeshift IPTA office during this time, 174 E. Rajbihari Avenue. Roy very vividly recollects how on 27th April 1948, police opened fire at all women's rally near Calcutta Medical College. Latika Sen, Pratibha Ganguly, Amiya Dutt, Geeta Sarkar became martyrs during this firing. IPTA during this time, through performance, expressed grief by composing a new song, which was titled Ar Koto Kal Bolo, Koto Kal, Shoibo Mrittu Ar Opoman. Reba points out that her only financial help during this time was ₹50 that she would receive by giving dance tuitions and utilizing her creative labor. In the year 1949, political prisoners went on a hunger strike that was going on in Presidency Jail. Roy, with her other comrades, started singing and raising slogans. During this time, one of the very popular songs was Dheu Uche Kara Tuche. I would like to play that for a while. And after that, I'll highlight on Reba Roy's experience of incarceration. So I'm quoting from Reba Roy's autobiography. She says, I suddenly found a pair of headlights advancing towards me. It was a police van. The police could do anything at that time. I jumped into the drain and found myself in dirty water. The police pulled me out of the drain, pulling my braid. They beat me mercilessly with their baton. Another female comrade, Jyoti Chakraborty, was beaten so much that her entire face and head were drenched in blood. We suddenly felt courageous and shouted at the police, "Are you not feeling any shame in beating a woman twice your age?" The police incarcerated Reba and her fellow inmates in a small, dingy room at Lal Bazar Police Station, Calcutta. They did not provide food and gave dirty blankets to cover their bodies. Days later, they were given few quarters of dry bread and they lit a lamp. The room was filled with bad odor and few other girls who did not have any piece of clothing to cover their bodies. Roy compares this description to Tolstoy's description of prison in his book Resurrection. Roy specifically says that the female actresses and political prisoners had commendable physical strength. All of them used to recite songs from their prison cells at the top of their voices to maintain moral support and derive strength from each other. Then after a few days of forced feeding, the forced feeding started of political prisoners. Roy points out how women goons were hired to beat female prisoners and forcefully inject rectum catheter through nose and forcefully feed milk. Reba Roy Chaudhary spent around 60 days like this. The day she was released, she had lost around 10 kgs of weight, and her inmates, when she was released in a very performative act, they sang Hemango Bishwas's song, আমরা তো ভুলি নেই সেই শহীদের সেই কথা ভুলবো না তোমার কালেজার খুনে রঙ্গাইলো A Ondhokar Jailkhana. So coming to the last leg of my presentation, I would like to point out at this stage that actresses like Shriti Mitchell and Reba Roy embodied this new gender culture amidst harsh socio-political climate they were subjected to on an everyday basis. Actresses of the IPTA did mark a rupture as they acted in unconventional ways that broke the previous paradigm of social thought regarding actresses, participating in the cause for people equally as their masculine counterpart, performing with an equal finesse and socio-politically motivated and enthusiastic at an equal level, but unfortunately relegated to the peripheries in the larger historical meta-narrative. Compensatory histories regarding women who were a part of socio-political struggles try to highlight how female bodies could represent masculine activism. In case of actresses, a constant comparison with their male counterparts in historical writing leads to a redundant analysis. Similarly, emancipation and carving out of a feminine space cannot be gauged through their ability to perform and conduct their political activities side by side to men. Drawing this parallel is problematic, as many of the women like Mitchell, Shriti Mitchell, embodied a subversion of the domestic in the public. Their occupational mobility was a constant movement between inside and outside, unlike their male counterparts. Ania Loomba also highlights that communist women did have a Lakshman Rekha or a boundary, a line that could not be crossed regarding their own choices. They still disavowed feminism as a bourgeois and Western concept. However, some of them did not consider marriage and childbirth as the logical culmination of a woman's life. Actresses of the IPTA also inherited and inhabited the patriarchal structure and the conservative public and private divide extolled by upper class and upper caste men. The kind of feminine space that they became a considerable part of was somewhat between radicalism and conservatism steeped in morality. Their radical lives had in-depth psychological underpinnings of underground life or the life of a nomad touring from village to village. It will be too simplistic to connote their self-expression in their memoirs to be hagiographic. In the light of revolutionary women like Kalpana Dutt, Preetilata Vadedar, memoirs like these of these actresses come political workers have been rendered to the periphery. With that, I come to an end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening, and I would invite comments from the chair now.
Oh, excellent. Very brilliant presentation. So it's insightful, very insightful and very interesting. The way you are encouraging the talk to talk with you and to discuss with your ideas. It's very interesting. I'm really interested to work with you more after this as well. So
yes, that would be great. I am myself a great admirer of your work and social political theater and your plays.
Thank you. So I would like to, I'd like to invite our participants, and later I will join. If anyone please would like to ask any question or any comments and any discussion, please join us. Thank you. Chandan, yes, please. Halda, please.
Hello. Yeah, I'm not switching on my video because I'm in a little bit of a issue here with the background.
Yeah,
but thank you, Twisha. That was a wonderful talk and very inspiring. Always a pleasure to hear you. And so my question is, I'm interested to know, so I actually have two things that I was thinking while you were speaking, thinking of. So one is I would be very interested to know what kind of, because you talk about this constant travel between the inside and the outside, which I think is so interesting. So I would want to know what kind of familial support bases did these women actors find? Or and in terms of familial support bases, I wouldn't only refer to their immediate kin and family, but also from the party, from the Communist Party, because was it a very supportive environment in which they were working? So that would be one of the questions that I had. And the second one would be, I would be also interested to know that if you have had, if any part of your work also involves a comparison between Reba Roy and Shriti Mitchell's narrative in terms of, I mean, as an audience, it seems to me that they came from two very different worldviews. So I would be very interested to know what kind of comparisons do you see in their narrative? Thank you.
Thank you, Modulogna, for that wonderful insight and both the questions. Answering the first question on what kind of support they mandated both inside and outside, I would like to point out towards the sexual lexicon of the time, which was strongly tethered to the patriarchal mores. Although because of the rapidly changing social and political scenario, it mandated a kind of pushing them out of the domestic spheres, the actresses I'm talking about. However, the kind of patriarchy that was imbued was invisibilized and also embodied by these women. As I would like to say that I'm arguing for a feminine space in the People's Theatre, but at that time, these actresses did not argue for a feminine space or conceptualize what emancipation is. They were themselves strongly tethered to the patriarchal mores. So keeping that in mind, the support that they garnered from their families was contested. It was problematic because, as I pointed out, Shriti Mitchell's father was not happy with her joining theatre. And in the professional sphere, they were constantly subjected to this sexual gaze by men. For example, when portraying one of the characters, Ella, Shriti Mitchell was criticized on her looks. So these kind of factors were constantly at work. In spite of the actress portraying their creative labor and trying to prove themselves through performance time and again. But that's why I say that it marked a rupture from the overtly sexualized gaze of the 1800s from Vinodini and Jagatarini's generation. But it did not completely turn their space in public and in private upside down. And coming to the second question, Madhu, I just it slipped out of my mind. Can you repeat your second question, please?
So I was asking that I wanted to know your reflections on a comparison between Shriti Mitchell and Reba Roy, because to me they seem two very interesting characters from very different worldviews.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree. They came from two very different worldviews. One being, and even professionally, they mandated a very different space. Shriti Mitchell became very popular both in cinema and in theatre. However, Reba Roy Chaudhary was, her autobiography reflects how hard she worked for the political movement, but was rendered to the periphery. I don't engage in a comparison, so to say, because a comparison would again fall at the risk of reducing their nuanced experiential histories. I want to look at them as individual actresses who, through their creative labor, mandated spaces. So yes, I don't compare them, but absolutely they came from different familial backgrounds. Professionally, they mandated separate spaces, and their experiences were also very different. Shriti Mitchell was the wife. Later on, she married Shombu Mitchell, and it's very interesting to note that how kind of patriarchy they embodied that changed their notions after marrying. Because in her autobiography, in Mitchell's autobiography, she points out that how the other male comrades or the group she was touring with used to see her with suspicion and the quote-unquote male gaze. But after she married Shambhu Mitra, that drastically changed. So it again points out that there was a transition, but it did not completely rupture the patriarchal ethos at work. So thank you, Madhulagna, for those wonderful questions.
Thank you so
Tisha.
much. Yeah.
Thank you, Madhulagna. Thank you, Tisha. Before I go to Mohammed, I would like to ask Chandan, please, you can join us.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, and thank you, Tisha, for your fantastic presentation. I wrote it there. I worked in the Eastern Thespians theatre group in UK, and we went to the Ed Fringe. And I wrote that we met a gentleman after the play, and he was an OBE, and he asked us straight away that how many girls you have in your group. So the gauge you said, which has happened to be 70 years back in Asia, still, I mean, as an Asian women theatre activist in Bangladesh or in India or even in the UK, it's not that much change. So
Absolutely.
I mean, I hope that you will, put some light on that sort of context.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I agree
Yes, please,
with that.
Tisha.
Yeah, thank you, Chandan, for that comment, because that was one of the primary reasons what motivated me to research on actresses, just actresses. I'm not talking about the entire cultural movement or the progressive cultural movement. I just talk about the actresses, and I make it a point to again and again point out towards their skill, which has been marginalized from the larger meta-narrative of labor history, and also from the meta-narrative of political movements. And this kind of analysis, it also, we see a similar trajectory developing in the world in cinema as well, where the first generation of actresses were Anglo-Indians. We needed like fair women to be on screen. And then even today, talking about female actresses on stage and talking about performance theory, it's very, the kind of beauty we attach to an actress is something which has lingered on and which is a direct result of male gaze from the 1800s. And the notions of beauty, the notions of an actress being bold, an actress being like radical or outspoken, these stereotypes have lingered in the social circle till date. And I'm very happy, Chandan, you pointed that out, because it's one of the very interesting areas which I would also like to study further, and how that, for example, in the 60s and 70s until date, and how that works. But for now, I want to look into how this originated and to problematize the root of the issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandan, and thank you, Tisha, for the answering. And before I go to Mohammed, I would like to add something, 3 reasons and 3 investigations from my practice perspective in the UK and Bangladesh. Yes. The same thing Chandan raised is same question I faced from quote unquote from the same person, I think, same OBE or MBE in Glasgow, because when I was taking part in the 20th Glasgow Commonwealth Games with a theatrical production from Bangladesh, and the same question raised: how many actresses are there? So it's not changed. And from my active participation in the UK diaspora communities theatre practice, I saw so many examples. If you want to talk or if you want to go further, definitely I would be happy to. And the second thing is, in Bangladesh, we are facing so many socio-political or religious problem over there. But the Jatra is one of very, very original, if I say traditional, original theatrical expression of the Bangladesh or Bangla. It's just disappeared because of the patriarchal society and socio-political religious autonomized, minoritized, and problematized visions in these things and interventions. So the problem with the actress, the main problem with the actress, the patriarchal society and the administration are asking every time, is there any actress, or if the actress is there, so there will be sexual violence or sexual exploitation might be happen. So you need to stop it. So and so many censorship over there. So in terms of lots of questions and problems, again comes to women.
Yeah.
As a result, we see we just lost this heritage in Bangladesh. And third one, I will tell you later. But before that, I'd like to ask Mohammed Ahmedullah, please.
Yes.
Just want to ask you two short questions. One is, you mentioned about Bengal Famine, the play. Now, how many performances were they made and where? And also, did they have any problems with the British? Because the British were still there. And the second one is to do with communism, because, that time communism was a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Global competition, and it was serious. So did the British kind of do anything, keep an eye on them or infiltrate them? Do you know anything like that?
Yes, so this happened a lot before years before 1940s, when the Dramatic Performance Act was introduced, where all the plays which even remotely, quote unquote, incited sedition were banned. One of the plays were Neel Darpon, which resulted in a lot of debates and discussions. So during this time, during 1940s, the statist regime was, the colonial gaze was there on these plays, but it was not being banned in areas. It was not as strict as before, because 1940s represent a completely different political situation for the colonial state as well. So during this time, the independence movement, the national movement, at the same time, the Second World War was basically where the majority of the statist gaze and statist actions were targeted to. So at this time, especially before 1947, socialist plays on famine, plays on poverty became very, very popular among the masses. And this was one of the ways to spread awareness. There was a very close line between nationalist plays and socialist plays during this time as well, because as I read both the autobiographies, Shriti Mitchell and Reba Roy, they both talk about how they joined acting and performing with the zeal of patriotism. So that also becomes a very contested sphere of debate and engagement, and how the two schools of thought, that is nationalism and communism, became separate after 1947, especially in the cultural arena. Thank you so much for those questions.
Just one thing, Sudeep, there is a question. Oh yes, she's got her hands up. Okay. Sudeep, I'm passing on to you here.
Oh, I would like to invite Simon, please.
Yeah, hi. Twisha, you already kind of talked about this in answering a previous question, but I was just wondering about whether the sexual lexicon that embodied these actresses, what it's like today, and whether it's changed since the 1940s.
Yes, it has. The 1940s definitely, thank you, Simone, for the question, first of all. And 1940s, as I said, that it definitely represented a rupture in the profession of acting for female workers as compared to the previous generation. However, at the same time, they were targeted to the patriarchal mores of the society and the male gaze, which lingered in the social circle till 50s, 60s. And we had a couple of examples on how that still, in its different form, is doing rounds in the social circle when it comes to the profession of actresses. Yes, thank you, Simone, for that question.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Tisha, for the answering very rightly. I would like to invite Musalman Kalam, please join us. Kalam, can you unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me come closer to the microphone. So what I was going to say is thank you for your contribution. It's really noble and very, very thorough work. So interesting lecture you gave. So it's interesting. My question is, are there any film museums in Bangladesh showcasing women's contribution to film in Bangladesh? So that's a simple question, like a basic question, I suppose. I'm sorry, but I'm keen to understand that more.
Unfortunately, I do not have much knowledge about the kind of museums, and in Bangladesh, I think Dr. Ahmadullah would know more about this. But in Calcutta, definitely there is no museum catering to women, like to actresses. There is no memorialization process of actresses, and that is the gap primarily I am addressing through my research, that their history should be made a part of the larger meta-narrative of labor movement and political movement during 1940s. So thank you,
Yes.
Kalam, for that
Tisha.
question.
Thank you, Tisha. But the question Kalam asked, I can contribute to your question. The thing is, you were asking about the film actors' contribution or the museums in Bangladesh. There is an archive. There is an archive, the National Archive, and there are lots of films since 60s, mid 60s, till the date. The awarded films are over there. The contributions are recently written and described in some script, some academic spheres. There's other thing, and if you want to know about the theater actress or theater performer's contribution to the national or if I say political sphere, and through performance, through productions, yes, there are some academic writings. I can say some names like Syed Jamil Ahmed, Selim Aldin. Selim Aldin wrote everything in Bangla, but Jamil Ahmed wrote in lots of his articles, books, scholarly articles, and his essays in English. So, and I have some writings, and some of my colleagues has. So, if you want to know more about the theatrical contributions, please do let me know. I will definitely contribute to your asking your question. And the next is, yes, Muhammad Ahmadullah, please.
Oh,
Just wanted to point out, give some information. Recently, there has been some actress, coming forward, making allegations what they have suffered, from the hands of men, and also from some recordings, secret recordings of telephone conversation we have had, and they're really horrific. I mean, a while ago, I used to, mix with a whole range of people. I became aware that some people were actually wanting to go into, production, say drama, so that they can, they can have access to women, right? So you have that dimension as well in the field.
In terms of your UK experience, or in Bangladesh, or both?
No, Bangladesh. I'm talking about Bangladesh, People, even some people from UK, they were thinking of going to Bangladesh to make drama, so that they can, all the actresses are prostitutes, so they can have easy access to them.
Yes.
It's very interesting how that has actually lingered. Like Binodini's autobiography from 1870s, she talks about in great detail. And also Shukumari Dotto, who started her first all-females theatre, and later on she was abandoned by her husband because of the public nature of the profession, and her creative skill went unaccounted for. So this has been a part of history writing, but has been rendered to the periphery on the kind of exploitation which is being basically mandated from the 1870s, and as well as various actresses have written that, like for Shriti Mitchell and Reba Roy, I have to actually read between the lines when they talk about the specific examples when they are being being insinuated, or there are comments, because even in the autobiographical form of writing, they are not putting that forth because of being a respectable woman. They can't write about their experiences as well. So I'm very grateful for Binodini's autobiography and her remarkable criticism of men from highest echelons of the society, which later on is missing, and for historians it becomes a task to reconstruct that, because it was present, and from examples like how she was, how the audience used to comment on her face, on her beauty, or how she was basically sidelined by by a male actor, is how we construct this argument. So it becomes very interesting.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ahmed, please.
Hi, it's a really interesting talk. Thank you, speaker.
Thank
to Sudeep. Mr. Sudeep?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, 2 years ago, I think in 2019, you did a master class. And it's not very related to this topic, but since it's theatre, I was just wondering, would you be doing any more master classes around East London area?
Oh, are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm not sure about this one, but if I will do, definitely you will know. Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, the question wasn't really related, but
yeah, it's fine. Thank you. I'm going back to Bangladesh day after tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone have any question, please raise your hands.
I think there's a comment from Chandan again.
Yes, he gave the name of a book. Could you please read it, please?
Yes, Munira Murshid. Chandan said Munira Murshid Munni had done research on women in film in Bangladesh. She is a facility of Pathshala.
Faculty. She's a faculty of Pathshala.
She's a faculty of Pathshala, a photography school based in Dhaka.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, John.
One interesting investigation has done by Syed Jamil Ahmed in one of his articles, and I cited his investigation in one of my writing. It's from 13th to 16th century in Bangladesh, in Bangla, how women performer disappear from stage, and what is the reason. So he showed 3 reasons. One is Muslim Shashun, is Islamization.
Yes.
And second is Vaishnav Natya Geet Chorcha, is Vaishnav ritualistic musicals performance. And third is Samajik Rajnoitik Prabhav Bichchinno Nandonik Chahida, যা শক্তির লাস্য ও তাণ্ডব ধারণা স্বীকার করে. It's by Eugenio Barba and Nicolas Everest. They says about the anima and animus, and which is not incorporated with the socio-political, aesthetical influence of Bengal. So there are 3 reasons he says is the reasons behind women performer disappear from stage. Between 13 to 16. Yes.
Can you again name the author? I would like to look into.
Yes, Syed Jamil Ahmed. I'm writing his name on the chat box. Syed Jamil Ahmed. And if you can't find it online, please let me know. I will definitely send you the link. Thank you.
So can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
When I was in Bali, I saw, a lot of men dressed up as a women to perform, right? Could that be for the same reason? I know the Bali, there's not much segregation between men and women, but they seem to be quite, they're there. But why is there a tradition like this in India as well?
Yes, of course. I talk about that in the first half when I'm discussing Arya Darshan's essay. So before the first induction of women in theatre was only in 1870s. So before that, there was this culture of transvestism when men used to dress like the culture of cross-dressing. And later on, it was realized, discussed in public debates that the kind of the cross-dressing culture would result in tendencies of homoeroticism and homosexuality. And that's why it became problematic to do that. And after that, there was this very problematic induction of actresses. It was done by a Russian playwright, Gerasim Lebedev, in Calcutta for the first time.
I think in Bali, what I've seen is that they're keeping that as a traditional kind of performance, in a traditional way that they tell stories in the island.
It's 3 o'clock. Yes, in Indian context and the mythological context, we do have characters like portraying half man, half women, and characters like that. But when it comes to a discussion in the public area and in the public forum, it's very interesting to note the change in the modern social thought and how there was this abject fear of sexuality and like bodily aesthetics, which mandated certain actions time and again. So mythologically, for example, when Binodini played the character of Choitonno, a saint, people literally went till her feet and touched her feet. But when she came out of that character behind the stage, she was seen as a prostitute, as someone's mistress, or or a woman who could be violated to an extent. So that kind of a difference between mythology and like realism and reality, it becomes interesting to read between the lines.
Thank you. It's the same experience I had during my research work in Bangladesh. So yeah, please, Ahmed, do you like to ask something? Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. It was my mistake.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So I had two of my investigations and research paper published in Bangladesh from Asiatic Society of Bangladesh. One is women performer in the Western influenced theater in urban Dhaka, which was in Bangla, and another is the women performer in Bangla theater. I wanted to look into the indigenous / traditional theater practice since Charyapod, yes, where we found the women performer exists at that time is before Christ, and we call this Nachanti Bajilo Ganti Devi Buddha Natak Bisamahui. Ganti Devi is a woman performer, and the men performer they're playing drum and some other instruments, and women performer are performing on stage. So we got this kind of clue and narratives that shows women performer exist in Bangla sphere without any political, social, and religious autonomy on them at that time. But in course of time during 12th, 13th century, and as I said, that said by Soya Jamil Ahmed from his investigation, that during this time, 13th to 16th century, we saw lots of changes happened during this Chaitanya and Islamization and some other aesthetic, political, social changes. Yeah. So yeah, I think Murad Khan joined here. Do you like to ask something, Murad Bhai? Please.
Yeah, I was just starting with it's a very good. I couldn't I didn't get the full lecture or full session, but I have seen some of them. The way you combined this political awareness and political participation at that time, I think at that time that created or that developed a different kind of image of female performers at that time, because obviously I do agree with you, that created as you say, that performer create an image, and some audience sometimes they do respect like a differently, but when they are out of performance they do treat in a different way. That's political element created or developed and profile, social profile in a sense at that time. But I was just curious to see, how about before that? How about 100 years before, or before that? India was over there, the subcontinent was over there, but this theater at that time, obviously probably before Lebedev, it was in a very unique and organic way of performance or performing, which was related to religion, and respect was over there. People who performed over there, so like Kirtan or whatever the form it was, obviously they were really respected, I'm assuming, because people are really devoted to that. So how people see a performer, it is evolving or developing as we are developing lots of political and social factors involved in it. So like obviously religious role, what Sudeep was saying, that this Islamization or the way Islam came, that played a role as well. So in some subcontinent, at that time. But still we are facing what Ahmadullah Bhai was saying, that still we are facing or can see that even in Edinburgh, that this mentality is over there. But I think, there is another element is missing, which is sexual orientation, which is there was a demand, or it was in a very indigenous and organic way in subcontinent to have sexual, so like gay or homosexual orientation was in a different way in subcontinent, and performance catered or entertained these segments of people as well. I was just thinking about our theater forms in Bangladesh. So people who played as a female performer or entertained audience of different sexual orientation, I think their role was very close the way our female performers played their role. So that need to be recognized somewhere, or relate, or somewhere, or make difference need to be mentioned somewhere, I think, as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry about that. Saying lots of things.
No worries. I completely agree with whatever points and comments you've raised. Also, I'd like to point out that from the onslaught of British rule in India, the kind of Western arrangement of theatre, many historians argue that it was like proscenium was Western British input. However, before that also theatre, for example, if I just talk about West Bengal, folk theatre existed, Jatra existed. Jatra also had cross-dressing and had a lot of religious connotations and songs as well. So from like after the onslaught of British, initially theatre was relegated to the bourgeois public sphere. Post which, from like, if I cut down to 1940s, the people's theatre I'm talking about was a very radical change in bringing, in basically stripping the bourgeois theatre from the hands of the elites and bringing them down to the masses in a very, like in the definition of Badol Sarkar's third theatre. Badol Sarkar himself being inspired by Augusto Boal's poor theatre. So we see a lot of transition in the form of theatre over the period. Also, the content was constantly evolving, coming in constant contact with the political sphere, with the cultural sphere. So, for example, 1857 represented a very different political sphere as compared to 1947 and 1940s. The kind of change that was happening in 1940s with the actresses like being a part of people's theatre was absolutely, I agree with you. It was mandated. It was a political necessity at that point when hands were needed to spread awareness regarding Bengal filming, to spread awareness, nationalistic awareness. So it was kind of a necessitated move, which immediately fizzled down after 47. It is very, like, I draw an analogy from what happened in Britain during the Second World War, when women were, the men went to the borders to fight, and women were pushed to the working sphere in the public domain. But after the war ended, there was a drastic public opinion that women should come back to the domestic periphery. So in a very similar manner, that was the political situation in 1940s, that the political climate mandated women to move out of their domestic spheres and to participate in political plays. Talking about 1870s, as in the first half of my presentation, I addressed to this fact that talking about West Bengal, Bhadra Mohilas, or like women from respectable middle-class household, looked down upon acting for a female as a profession. I have not encountered historiography where it's looked down upon by a male actor or a male counterpart, although theater was considered as a sin only, like the Bhadraloks indulged in, quote unquote, which was the larger opinion. However, initially, that's why the first generation of actresses came from the realms of prostitution. It's very interesting to note that they came to utilize their creative skill for an upward social mobility. For example, that is the case of Binodini and Tinkori. However, they were never detached with their previous identity. They were never seen as being detached. And the two kind of stories like fed into each other, of an actress coming from the background of prostitution also furthered the notion that female actresses are primarily public women. So it becomes very interesting to read between the lines and how this transitioned till, like, when I talk about 1940s, Reba Roy and Shriti Mitchell, they came from respectable families. It was the political climate that mandated that. However, their creative labor has been like sidelined throughout. Thank you, Murad, for those comments.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you.
Very helpful.
If we have any, I think we have some. Okay, I got this email from Kalam. I will send some information about what I said, and if anything else, no, I don't have any. If you have any questions, anyone, please raise your hands. We would like to invite you, and we'd like to listen to you. And one more thing in response to Ahmedullah's question, or the discussion he raised about Bali performance. The similar performance I have seen in Bangladesh, and still it exists, like Pala, Kamala Rani Shagurdigi, Kamalabuti, or Molua, Moymunsinho Gitika, Moymunsinho Pala. So there are the costumes the performer wear is, it looks like half woman and half man in these palas. And I have seen some performances that the enactment in the ritualistic performance, especially the Krishna, Shiva characters are played by women, young girls. And Kali performance is, Kali characters are performed by men. And this is Beta Kali, Beti Kali. I have seen this Kali performance in Sylhet area, in Molovi Bajar. And I saw that this Kali is the splitted, the notion of Kali. It's Beta Kali means the male Kali, and Beti Kali is female Kali. But the both are performed by men during Chaitra Sankranti. It's the it's a big festival, about the sheep Gauri and Charak Puja during this time. It's the closing month of Bangla calendar. So at the end of the month, end of the year, this performance is still existing in some parts of Bangladesh. So I have seen this performance as well. Also, I have seen some performances that the main performer are enacting as female because they don't have any female performers and they don't have access to get female performer, or they don't have much money to hire a female performer from city or some other area. So the male performer enacted as a female performer. So it's kind of like there is lots of strains and lots of streams over there. Yes, please, if you have anything to say, Ahmedullah, please.
Just to add to this, what Shriti Chakraborty was saying, that in Sylhet, Mymensingh, Netrokona, this area, there's another theater form called Getu Nach. It's like a Getu theatrical form in which, and where the male used to perform as female, and it was really popular in those areas at that time. So there is a tradition here in this part of Bangladesh and India where people played, male played as female and female played as male as well.
Thank you. Tisha, if you have anything to discuss about these things, or I'd like to invite Mahmoud Ahmedullah to say something and we can close, or maybe
we hear something from Tisha first before.
Yes.
Dr. Chakraborty, I think that is like a lot about like my research, whatever I've like tried to mention and put across. My larger aim and zeal is to make women's histories, especially in acting and performance, a larger part of the narrative which has been sidelined, which deals with aspects what we are discussing, like cross-dressing, and how there has been an evolution which is not necessarily teleological. So with that, I think that will be all. And I really thank Dr. Chakraborty for giving these wonderful insights and sharing my session, and Brick Lane Circle and Secretary Ahmedullah sir for giving me this opportunity. Once again, I'd like to thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, I'd like to thank you for wanting to make presentation at our platform, our events. Actually, it was really interesting, your presentation is really wonderful. So we'll have the video to go through it again, to absorb, more. And no, it's really, really wonderful. Thank you very much. And also, Sudeep, for chairing this session and contributing. They all sort of helped and complemented, the presentation, and some of the audience, who raised questions. And thank you for everyone for joining. And do keep an eye on, Brick Lane Circle events. And if anybody is ever interested in making presentations, you can contact us. We'll organize for you.